Hello everybody, it's your boy, Kion Prince, and just a quick warning, this video will contain spoilers for the new Mufasa movie. Also, I will refer to these lions using, human language for them. This is mainly because they think and act like people, and it's just easier and more clear than trying to adjust language and or figures of speech for them, especially since we're talking about very human subjects in this video. Alright, spoilers starting in 3, 2, 1. So, ever since Mufasa started playing, it's not surprising that people have started to have a new perspective on the brothers and their relationship, given the backstory nature of the film. However, this also means a lot of Scar apologists and justifiers have been coming out of the woodwork. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie adds a lot of layers to Scar's character, and with the amount of things that went against him in the movie and the hardships he faced, it's not a surprise that people have taken to feeling bad for him or have gained a level of understanding on how he became the way he is without necessarily thinking that it was correct. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. The main issue arises, though, from the people trying to say that his betrayal and attempted murder and later successful murder of his brother is justified by the events we see in the movie, which is kind of a wild take in general. But today, I'm essentially going to go over the main Scar apologist defenses I see for the character, and why they aren't valid excuses for literal murder. Also, before we get into it, another thing I think I should bring up is that we are exclusively talking about the CGI universe lore and not the 1994 animated lore. I've touched on this in another video that I did, but the 1994 lore and the 2019 lore are two entirely separate universes, and while I do think 1994 Scar always had the capacity to do what he did, even looking at his backstory, and I think that's part of the reason why there's a difference between his outcome and Kion's, it's been made pretty abundant. The connection and metaphors between snake venom and mental health are there, and if you're interested in learning more about that subject more specifically, I'll once again direct you to Kato Art, who's made a very well thought out and in-depth video on the subject of mental health in the Lion Guard that I know they worked really hard on, so definitely check it out if that piques your interest. Anyways, let's begin. So, one of the arguments I've seen thrown around is that Mufasa stole the favoritism of Taka's parents. Which for Eshe, I guess I can kind of see why that'd be a conclusion, even though it's still quite a flawed one in my opinion. Mufasa didn't steal her from Taka. Eshe is her own character who made her own choices regarding how she treated each of the boys, and Mufasa didn't do anything other than existing to get any form of favoritism from her, if that's the case. And it's not like it's a plan that he actively made to sneak into Taka's life and steal his parents from him. He didn't do anything to really get that. And whether or not Ashe or even Obasi shows him favoritism really has little to do with him actually, besides him just being a good person, and has everything to do with Eshe and Abase and their own choices as how they view Mufasa. Although, ignoring that each character has their own autonomy in favor of blaming Mufasa is a theme among Scar apologists, and we'll come back to that later. But even then, while Mufasa and Eshe definitely seemed closer than her and Taka, which makes sense given that Mufasa was raised with the lionesses and thus would spend more time with her, I'm not even sure I'd label it as favoritism. And it's shown that Abasi seems to limit the time Taka can spend with the lionesses, so I do think it might just be a matter of closeness. They're just closer. It's shown that Eshe still loves Taka very much, even after he ran instead of defending her, and the language she uses when telling Mufasa to keep him safe, to me, just further solidifies that Eshe simply has a closer relationship with Mufasa that's being mislabeled as favoritism, when it's not. She still loves them both the same, she just is closer to Mufasa because they spend more time together. Now, with Obasi, I don't really understand why people see this as Mufasa stealing his favoritism. Obasi was very against Mufasa up until shortly before his own death. The only reason Obasi changed his mind was because Mufasa had done something to earn his respect when saving his mate. And the only reason he even seems to show a favoritism towards him over Taka is specifically because Taka ran away. Mufasa didn't take Obasi's praise away from Taka. Taka not receiving any is him facing the consequences of his own actions. Now, this argument really confuses me, and I don't understand how anyone could possibly come to this conclusion, no matter what way you look at it. But nonetheless, I see it way too often. There are people saying that Mufasa got Taka's parents killed, which is a crazy take. Kiros was already planning to wipe out Taka's pride. That's the entire reason his son was there in the first place, to end up getting killed. This was the plan, period. Mufasa didn't do anything to solidify this plan more than it was already solidified, and it's made abundantly clear that this is something Kiros does.
Will be one ruler, one Lion King.
We hear both from Sarabi and even other lionesses who made it to Malele that Kiros and the Outsiders had wiped out their prides.
I was hoping to find my pride.
What happened to them?
The Outsiders happened.
This is what he does. Mufasa had nothing to do with this choice. This would have been Kiros's plan, regardless of whether Mufasa ended up killing his son or not. Now, do I think that Kiros probably pursued him more than he would have because he killed his son? Yes, but we'll wrap back on that in a second. And even if Kiros only made the decision to kill Taka's pride solely because Mufasa killed his son, because I feel like some viewers may think this is the case and that's why they make this argument, his son and the other lion from his pride were attacking Mufasa and Eshe on their own territory. They were very obviously aggressive invaders with intent to kill. Mufasa's killing of Kiros' son was completely out of defense and justified, and Kiros choosing to retaliate against that still wouldn't be on Mufasa, and that's why even though he probably was pursuing them more than he would have, that's still not Mufasa's fault. Mufasa was justified in attacking his son and eventually killing him. I don't even think it was Mufasa's intent to kill him. I think it just happened. And even if it was his intent, if Kairos' son was attacking with no means or without showing any intent to give up, Mufasa killing him would still be a valid response to getting attacked. Like, that's not on Mufasa for Kairos' reaction to that. And this is, another one of the instances where people are just admitting the fact that characters have their own autonomy. Why are we blaming Mufasa for Kairos' actions, and then I just did it wrong again. I can never get him right. Why are we blaming Mufasa for Kairos' actions, and then using that to justify trying to kill him? So, this is definitely the most common point I see, and I do feel like a large part of that is rooted in sexism and the objectification of female characters, but we'll touch on that in a bit. A lot of people like to claim Mufasa stole Sarabi from Taka, which, at this point, did you even watch the film? The song Tell Me It's You works to show that Mufasa has had feelings for Sarabi as well, not just Taka, and that he had fears and resignations stopping him from acting on these feelings. And a lot of this is probably rooted in self-doubt. It feels like Mufasa doesn't feel like he can have responsibilities put on him because he's not good enough for him. Wait, what? Because he's not good enough for them? At least that's my take on it.
When that moment presented itself in the script, when Sarabi confronts Mufasa and says, I know it's you. I know you're the one I love, and you're the one who's meant to be king. What was fun was finding the ways in which Mufasa has to kind of shed lots of layers and unlearn in order to let it in. He knows he loves Sarabi, but he doesn't think he's worthy of that love. He doesn't think that by any rights he deserves it.
And I personally thought that his infatuation with her was a little obvious when he seemed enamored by her in their very first time interacting. But also the attention to detail that he paid to her throughout the movie, surrounding her scent and her home, works to solidify this. I also think it's pretty bonkers to say that Mufasa stole Sarabi from Taka when Mufasa was super supportive towards Taka's interest in her, trying to give him advice, lying about him saving her to make him look good, and even when Sarabi figured it out, he was still trying to put in a good word for his brother.
Why did you lie to Sarabi? I made a promise to take care of my brother. to save my pride.
The fact that Mufasa did all of that whilst having feelings for her of his own further shows the stark contrasts between him and Taka. Even though I think part of this was rooted in his denial to his own feelings, when Mufasa found out Taka had interest in the same woman as him, he was supportive, tried to help his brother, and he wanted the best for him in the situation. When Taka found out Mufasa was interested in the same woman as him, he immediately threw an entitled hissy fit and turned around to try and kill his brother. How are people possibly trying to justify this? Now, you could argue that part of the burn was that Mufasa ended up getting the girl, which I would agree. However, part of emotional maturity is understanding that you aren't entitled to the affections of people you're interested in or in love with. Sometimes people just don't share your feelings, and that doesn't automatically make them or the person they do love a horrible person. Yes, a situation like this sucks, and it's okay to be upset about it, but treating the other person or people involved like awful people and trying to get them killed are not reasonable or excusable and just scream entitlement. And also, serial killer. Like, why are you trying to... I don't... Okay. Now, of course, this brings us back to omitting characters' autonomy, as well as the general sexism and objectification points. A lot of the people who I see preach this argument, and we even see it in Taka's perspective some as well, completely throw blame to Mufasa for this outcome. Now, I've already went over why blaming Mufasa in general makes no sense in this situation, but these people, wow. But these people also seem to justify, what the fuck? But these people also seem to completely ignore that Sarabi is capable of making her own choices, which is a common theme amongst all these arguments, but the language I see surrounding this specific argument also makes it pretty abundant. That this argument is also rooted in sexism, and more specifically, the objectification of women. I see people claim that Mufasa broke bro code because Taka had sights on her first, and other things of that nature, which is fucking wild. Hate to break it to you, but you can't own a person or lay a claim on them just because you are interested in them. I can't believe I have to say this, but Sarabi is her own person with her own interests, feelings, and choices. She loved Mufasa, not Taka. And if you paid attention to the movie, which at this point it's pretty abundant these people haven't, Sarabi never actually showed any true interest in Taka in general. You may be getting ready to say, well, she was impressed when he talked to her about her home and nuzzled him after the stampede, which may seem like clear indicators of interest, but what people fail to realize when watching these scenes is that the interest she was showing him was due to behaviors and attention to detail that were Mufasa's and not actually Taka's. So even where it seems like she's interested in Taka, it's actually Mufasa she was interested in because it was Mufasa's qualities that she was responding to. Now, I would like to clarify that Mufasa lying to Sarabi in the first place, while partially rooted in good intentions for his brother, I also think he was just deflecting here, as mentioned earlier, was not a good choice on Mufasa's part. I also think that Sarabi's language boiling Taka down to only existing to save Mufasa was also unnecessary and harsh at best. I don't want part of this video's takeaway to be that Mufasa and or Sarabi can do no wrong, because that's not true. A lot of these arguments, however, blame Mufasa for things that have nothing to do with his choices, which is why it may seem like I think the character is perfect. He's not. I know he's not. But he's also not nearly as bad as Scar apologists paint him to be. But I digress. This is another argument that confuses me because the movie makes it pretty clear throughout that Taka isn't fit to be king, which, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of that specifically comes from Obasi and not just Taka. Though I think it is important, however, to also hold Taka accountable and not only blame his father for his actions, because, again, there's only so much of that is his father's fault. He's still a grown person at this point. So only so much of it is excusable to Obasi. But the movie also makes it clear, however, that Mufasa was chosen by the animals of Malele to be their king. And even then, he was still trying to reject the title and responsibility. But he most definitely did not take the title. He most definitely did not take the title from Taka. Taka literally almost led these animals to their demise. And Mufasa was the one who showed leadership by bringing them together, fighting off Kiros, because Taka led him there. Why would they even want King? Why would he? What the fuck? Why would they even want Taka as their king? Even then, Taka was only king in his specific territory. Sarabi being a princess shows that other prides and territories have their own monarchies. This means Taka's title holds little weight outside his own pride. And even if it still held weight, he has no real power anywhere else. Mufasa didn't steal the role of King of Malele from Taka because it wasn't Taka's role to steal in the first place. Yes, I can understand why seeing your stray brother get elected to be king when you were supposed to be a king would create bitterness. But this brings us back to the topic of having the emotional maturity to understand that this isn't Mufasa's fault, and that he isn't a horrible person for becoming king. And even then, do people, or even Taka for that matter, just expect Mufasa to be like, nah, make Taka, the guy who actively almost ruined your peace and get you killed, or, make him the king, because he was supposed to be king somewhere else, so that makes sense, right? The animals more than likely would not accept Taka as king, even if Mufasa tried vouching for him here. And this would once again be a consequence of Taka's own actions, not Mufasa's. This is another argument I see thrown around a lot. I see people calling Mufasa's actions throughout the movie, like getting with Sarabi and becoming king and things along those lines, him being ungrateful about Taka saving his life. A lot of people, including Taka in the film, seem to believe that Mufasa owes Taka, and him not giving Taka what he wants or sacrificing his own wants for Taka is Mufasa being ungrateful, which is just bonkers to me. The entire argument of I did blank for you, and this is how you repay me, when people don't do what you want them to do, is pretty shitty and manipulative in general to actively use against someone or their own character. You should want to do good things like, saving someone's life, because it's good and the right thing to do, not because you want something from them or intend to hang it over their head for the rest of their life. A good example of this would be in Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not sure which one. I think it's the second one. But Yondu is attacking Star-Lord for going against him and brings up how he should be grateful because he saved him from getting eaten. And Star-Lord replies pointing out how weird it is to hang that over someone's head for 20 years, and that it's weird to tell him that he needs to be grateful for them not eating him and doing the right thing instead of the former. Because it's not normal to eat people, and it's not moral either. Which applies a lot more to Mufasa than you may think, seeing as how Bossie would have eaten him if Taka didn't let him win. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be grateful to someone for doing something for you, or for them saving your life. However, something as extreme as choosing to save someone brings up the point that it's the right thing to do. And it's weird to act like someone needs to be in service or debt to you because you made the right choice to not let them die. It's just an incredibly weird mindset to have. Don't get me wrong, I know that it can be easy to slip into a mindset of entitlement like this, and in some cases it may be justified depending on the circumstances. But there is a big difference between thinking these thoughts before holding yourself accountable and correcting them as needed, and actively using this as an argument to treat someone poorly, or, in the case of Mufasa, kill someone. I mean, even I've had times where I've had these lines of thought where I felt wronged and entitled to gratefulness, and had to call out and correct myself on it. We are human. But I think most people can agree that using a thought process like that to justify trying to kill people is not normal at all. Anyways, that's a lot, but those are the main points I see when it comes to people trying to say that Mufasa had it coming to him, or that Taka was justified in betraying him. I've just been seeing these arguments almost constantly, and feel like there's a need for this discussion. I hope you all enjoyed this breakdown and found it interesting. I didn't mean for it to get quite as deep as it did, but I feel like it's hard to what the fuck? But I feel like it's hard to discuss some of these topics without tackling the complexities of them. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, and have a good day.
Hey guys, so I actually made this video a couple months ago when Mufasa was still running in theaters, and just got too lazy to edit it after the first 3 minutes, which is why the rest of the video you see is just the same photo, because I finally decided to edit it and was too lazy to actually go through and add all of the dynamic faces for Kion. But Mufasa did just come out on Disney Plus a couple days ago, and I still see these arguments being thrown around left and right, so I still feel like there is a need for this discussion, or that it's at the very least still relevant. But yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments, and have a happy, healthy, safe rest of your day or evening, whatever time it may be.
Savannah, I'm coming home, Savannah.